merely a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 98 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. Today I want to enter one of the oldest and strangest questions in human history. What if civilization has forgotten something? Not just lost its history, not just buried ruins, but lost knowledge. This is knowledge that is hidden inside symbols, inside temples, inside rituals, repeated for centuries behind closed doors. Because throughout history, there have always been whispers that certain groups knew more than the rest of society. You've heard of the Egyptian priesthoods, the mystery schools of Greece, the alchemists, the Kabbalists, the Rosicrucians, the Templars, but perhaps most famously of all, the Freemasons. This is an organization of very powerful men who, even in my year now 2026, still gather in private lodges, wearing ceremonial regalia, performing ancient rituals, swearing blood-curdling oaths, guarding symbolic secrets, and preserving traditions that stretch back centuries. Their official explanation is simple. Freemasonry is a fraternity devoted to morality, charity, brotherhood, and personal growth. And perhaps for many, if not most members, that is exactly what it is. But critics have always asked a darker question. Why would influential men, politicians, judges, military leaders, financiers, intellectuals, preserve their secrecy so intensely unless there was something very deep hidden underneath? Now that question has produced centuries of speculation. Some believe Freemasonry preserves fragments of ancient wisdom, traditions passed down from lost civilizations. Others believe the symbols conceal hidden metaphysical truths about consciousness, reality, and the structure of existence itself. Some claim the pyramids and temples of the ancient world were built using technologies modern civilization barely understands: sacred geometry, acoustic resonance, lost engineering systems, perhaps even knowledge inherited from civilizations destroyed long before recorded history. And then the theories become stranger still, because in the 20th century, occultists like Aleister Crowley began describing contact with non-human intelligences through ritual practices. Figures like Jack Parsons, that rocket scientist by day and ceremonial magician by night, blurred the line between science mysticism and something far more unsettling. Were these merely psychological experiences, archetypes emerging from the unconscious mind, or were occult rituals actually attempts to communicate with something beyond ordinary reality? Now, today, some researchers no longer speak about spirits or demons, but interdimensional intelligences, non-human entities existing alongside us, hidden just outside the limits of human perception. And strangely, the language begins to overlap. Initiation, hidden knowledge, sacred geometry, symbolic gateways, transformation through ritual, ancient temples aligned to the stars, secret societies preserving forbidden wisdom across generations. And at some point, conspiracy theory, religion, occultism, and alternative history all begin circling the same terrifying possibility. What if humanity once knew something profound and lost it? Or worse, what if someone still knows? Because maybe the real power of secret societies has never been political. Maybe their true power lies in the idea that beneath ordinary reality there may exist hidden layers of knowledge, hidden structures of influence, and perhaps even hidden intelligences watching from beyond the edges of human understanding. And whether those hidden forces are psychological, spiritual, symbolic, extraterrestrial, or something even stranger, that's the mystery I want to explore. One of the most fascinating things about Freemasonry for me is there are effectively two parallel narratives surrounding it. The first, of course, is the official Masonic narrative, and one that's espoused by a relative of mine who, I must tell you straight away, is the head Freemason in Germany, or at least he was. And I only found that out by accident a number of years ago. If you meet the man, he denies everything that I'm about to tell you that's considered to be a conspiracy theory, and maintains the official line that Freemasonry is merely a philosophical fraternity, and it's dedicated to morality and symbolism, charity and personal development. And when you meet the man, you could never think anything different. He's the most congenial, friendly, lovely man, and seems completely sincere in what he's saying. But the second is this critical and conspiratorial narrative that Freemasonry is actually a hidden power. It's a structure that's tied to political manipulation, occultism, elite networking, and historical secrecy. These two narratives rarely agree with each other, and in fact, they often directly contradict one another. I ended up having quite an intense argument with my relative, and to be honest, we really haven't spoken since. S. Brent Morris's book, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry, seemed to me as good a place to start as any if I was trying to find a neutral, if not pro-Freemasonry representation. It's definitely out there as the mainstream insider explanation of Masonry. Morris was himself a master Mason and wrote specifically to counter the myths and conspiracy theories surrounding the fraternity. And by contrast, I read another book by John J. Robinson, and it's called Born in Blood. And then, of course, the biggest conspiracy theorists of all, a Swedish man called Juri Lina, who's written The Architects of Deception. Now, these two books sit much closer to the alternative history and conspiracy tradition. So those three books should give me the full spectrum of pro-Freemasonry, in the middle Masonry ideas, and then complete conspiracy. Now, Robinson attempts to uncover hidden historical origins beneath official Masonry history, while Lina goes further and portrays the secret societies as active engines of political manipulation and ideological control. This comparison reveals not only competing interpretations of Freemasonry, but also something larger about modern society, a deep conflict between institutional explanations and suspicion towards some form of hidden power. But first of all, if we go to Brent Morris's Freemasonry for idiots, what does Freemason claim to be? Well, fundamentally, it claims to be a fraternal organization, a moral teaching system, a symbolic tradition, a charitable brotherhood, and probably most of all for the man down the street, it's a social institution focused on ethical self-improvement. Now, Morris strongly rejects the idea that Masonry is a secret government or an occult religion or a satanic organization, or a global conspiracy, or has anything to do with revolutionary politics. He presents Masonry as misunderstood rather than sinister. He says that the secrecy is ceremonial and is not conspiratorial, and symbols are educational, not magical, and rituals are allegorical, not occult operations, and brotherhood is social, not political. The official Masonic narrative argues that outsiders often misunderstand the fraternity because they see secrecy and symbolism and naturally assume hidden agendas. But if you look at Robinson's view, he does not portray Freemasonry as evil, but he does argue that its official history is incomplete or maybe false. His central claim is that Freemasonry may descend from underground Templar survivals after the destruction of the Knights Templar in 1307. In his theory, Masonic rituals were preserving the memories of this persecution, and Masonic secrecy originated as survival strategy, and Masonic symbols contain hidden historical codes. And the organization may have roots in anti-establishment resistance. Robinson challenges the official explanation that Freemason simply evolved from medieval stonemason guilds. Mainstream Masonic historians generally reject Robinson's direct Templar idea, but Robinson's work remains very influential because it gives Masonry a hidden medieval lineage, but full of mystery, persecution, and survival. Now, reading Uri Lehner, it goes much further. And in his book, The Architects of Deception, and also the video by the same name that I watched on YouTube, he presents Masonry and related secret societies as part of a much larger system of hidden influence that shape and have always shaped world events. And he argues that revolutionary movements such as the Russian Revolution or the French Revolution were manipulated by hidden elites, that secret societies influence political revolutions, and that the occult symbolism that appears in governments, like in America, and institutions, is proof of the deep-rooted influence of Freemasonry. Financial power, banking, and ideological movements are all interconnected, and public history is there, but it hides the deeper structural control. Now, where Morris saw fraternity, Lehner sees these insidious networks, and where Morris saw symbolism or moral teaching, Lehner interprets this symbolism as hidden communication between elites, and even deference towards occult or perhaps interdimensional beings. Now, where Morris dismisses conspiracy theories, Lehner builds an entire world view around them. Now, the central difference between these two books is that the official Masonic narrative is that secrecy is the tradition, and that the privacy creates a meaningful initiation experience, and passwords and signs are symbolic remnants of historical customs, and that the secrets are just largely ceremonial. But critics interpret this completely different. They think the secrecy is implying some form of hidden agendas, and that the rituals imply a hidden doctrine, and that the initiation implies psychological conditioning, maybe cult-like behavior, and the hierarchy implies the hidden power structures. The difference is very crucial. So there is a gap between what some people say. The symbols, are they education? Are they occult? Freemasonry is very deeply symbolic. They have the square and compass. They have the all-seeing eye. Just take a look at a dollar bill if you want to see that. Pillars, geometric imagery, ritual architecture, and sacred measurements. They love numbers too, like 3s and 33s. Morris's interpretation is that the square symbolizes ethical conduct. The compass symbolizes restraint. Architectural tools represent self-improvement, and the rituals are just drama that teaches a virtue, and they're just educational metaphors. But the critics will say that they are occult signals. They're esoteric codes. They're evidence of hidden allegiance, and they're signs of an elite continuity. Now, the official narrative is that famous Masons did exist, and Masons did participate in revolutions, and that Masons influenced civic life, and Masons helped shape institutions. But the official narrative rejects the idea of some centralized, hidden control. Freemasonry is influential because many influential people joined it, not because Masonry secretly rules society. Now, critics reverse this entirely. They say that the powerful people join Masonry precisely because it's a hidden influence network, and that elite connections create invisible coordination, and that the brotherhood creates loyalty way beyond public accountability, and that shared rituals reinforce an elite identity. Now, Lena especially connects Masonry to broader theories involving the banking system, political revolutions, ideological movements, intelligence operations, global governments, and to him Freemasonry becomes less a club and more a hidden infrastructure of power. Now, Morris has an official idea about the evolution versus the conspiracy theorists who claim there's a hidden lineage. Morris claims that Freemasonry evolved from operative stonemason guilds, and that's what I heard growing up. Speculative Masonry emerged in Great Britain. The first Grand Lodge formed in 1717, and rituals evolved gradually over time. Now that's the accepted academic model. Now, Robinson's historical narrative says that the Templars survived underground. The Masonic traditions preserve Templar memories, and these go back to the 13th and 14th century. Rituals encode historical trauma, and the official origin story is completely incomplete. Now, this theory is controversial because documentary evidence is very limited. But Robinson's narrative is very interesting because it transforms Masonry into a secret continuation of a medieval resistance movement. Now, when it comes to Masonry as a religion and spirituality, that's what I get really interested and excited about. And Morris, of course, insists that Freemasonry is not a religion. Most people understand that. And his official explanation is that Masons have to generally believe in a supreme being, and different religions are accepted. Although, as you might know, the Catholics do not allow people to join Freemasonry. Masonry, according to Morris, supplements morality. It's not salvation. And that the Masonic lodges, which are the places like the clubhouses, avoid any religious or theological conflict. It's presented as a spiritually compatible force that's there with all religions. Now, of course, the critics disagree with this very sharply. They say that Masonry contains hidden esoteric doctrines, and that rituals substitute for authentic religion, and that the symbols conceal occult philosophy. And the higher degrees, and they're higher degrees that are even known by normal Masons, rather like Scientology, reveal secret teachings. Lena's work often frames secret societies as vehicles for ideological and spiritual manipulations. In history, he says that the Catholic Church was hugely oppositional to Freemasonry, which is true. They had tremendous problems with authoritarian governments, extremist movements. They had to fight off the conspiracy theories and some Protestant groups. Now, some of the most powerful historical figures who were known Freemasons were George Washington. And anyone who knows about Freemasonry will hear how Washington, D.C. is riddled with Masonic buildings, symbols, architecture, design. And even the dollar bill itself is full of Masonic symbols. Benjamin Franklin, Winston Churchill, Mozart. You'll remember in the Mozart film how he was killed, but he was a member of a Masonic group, along with Schikaneder, who wrote the libretto for the Magic Flute, which is all about Freemasonry. Numerous judges, politicians, and businessmen. This creates an appearance of an elite network. Now, the symbolism also invites interpretation. Now, one of the most controversial accusations against Freemasonry is the claim that beneath its public image as a charitable fraternity lies a hidden occult or esoteric religion. And this is why I'm so fascinated in it and why I want to do this episode on talking to the dead. The idea has circulated for centuries and forms one of the central pillars of anti-Masonic literature. Critics argue that Freemasonry conceals mystical teachings from lower members, and higher degrees reveal occult doctrines, that Masonic symbolism has pagan or Hermetic origins, and that certain rituals invoke hidden spiritual entities. Masonry acts as a gateway into esoteric traditions. Now, of course, mainstream Freemasonry and my relative strongly rejects these accusations. The conflict between these interpretations becomes especially intense around three subjects. Firstly, there's Jabulon or Jabulon. Then there's the Lucifer allegations. And then, of course, as we've mentioned many times on this podcast, my old friend Aleister Crowley and occultism in his links. What is Jabulon? Well, one of the most famous controversies includes the word Jabulon, sometimes spelled differently from Jabulon and spelt Jahbulon. But the term appears in certain rituals connected to the Royal Arch degree of Freemasonry and with some other branches of Freemasonry. And critics claim that Jabulon is the secret Masonic god. I've even seen a picture of what Jabulon is supposed to be. He seems to have 3 heads. He looks like he might be a bit of a scorpion in the middle, a cat on the left, and a toad on the right. But whatever he is, he seems to be some form of being, some form of interdimensional entity. The name combines pagan and biblical deities, and Freemasonry, if you believe it, secretly worships this occult entity. Now, anti-Masonic writers often interpret the word as a fusion of Jah, from Jehovah or Yahweh or God, Bul or Baal, and On, linked to Osiris or Egyptian traditions. This interpretation has fueled accusations that Masonry secretly blends Christianity with pagan mystery religions. Now, the official Masonry response is that the word is symbolic rather than theological. It represents allegorical traditions within ritual dramas, that Freemasonry does not teach worship of a separate god, and that Masons are remaining free to practice their own religions. But some Grand Lodges have even revised or removed controversial ritual language to avoid any misunderstanding. But critics, however, argue that changing the wording itself suggests awareness of problematic symbolism. What about the Lucifer accusation? Well, perhaps the most explosive accusation against Freemasonry is the claim that it is secretly venerating Lucifer. Now, this theory became widespread, largely because of 19th century anti-Masonic writers, especially the infamous Taxil hoax. In the late 1800s, the French writer Leo Taxil published sensational stories claiming that Freemasons worshipped Lucifer and that Masonic rituals involved demonic ceremonies, and elite Masons practiced occult Satanism. And these stories became enormously influential among anti-Masonic groups. But in 1897, Taxil publicly confessed that he had fabricated the entire story as a prank and social experiment. But despite the confession, many Luciferian conspiracy theories survived and continue circulating today. But you'd ask yourself the question, why do the Lucifer allegations still persist? And several factors keep this accusation alive. That Freemason, of course, uses symbolism of light imagery, enlightened symbolism, and references to hidden wisdom. And of course, critics sometimes interpret light as Luciferian because the Latin name Lucifer originally meant light bringer. But however, in mainstream symbolism, light represents knowledge and ignorance is represented by darkness. So Masons generally insist these are philosophical metaphors, not satanic theology. Another source of the confusion came from the claims of Albert Pike, a 19th century Scottish Rite Mason. Anti-Masonic literature frequently quotes Pike as saying Lucifer is God. However, historians have noted that many famous anti-Masonic Pike quotations have been either fabricated, distorted, or completely removed from context. Still, Pike's genuinely esoteric writing style contributes to the perception that higher degree Masonry contains occult philosophy. The esoteric traditions around Masonry denies Lucifer worship. Critics point out that many esoteric movements historically overlapped socially with Masonry, such as Rosicrucianism, or Hermeticism, or ceremonial magic, or theosophy, or the occult revival movements. All of this fuels suspicion, of course, though, that Masonry serves as a gateway into hidden mystical traditions. And of course, my favourite, Aleister Crowley. No figure really intensifies the occult Masonry narrative more than Aleister Crowley, because Crowley was an occultist. He was a ceremonial magician. He was the founder of Thelema. He was member of multiple esoteric orders. And as we learned last week with Scientology, he was involved with Hubbard and others and was one of the most controversial spiritual figures of the 20th century. And because Crowley was associated with so many fringe Masonic style groups, critics often use him as evidence that Freemasonry has occult foundations. But Crowley's actual relationship to Freemasonry is very complicated. I don't think for a second he needs to use Freemasonry because he created a perfectly suitable occult system for himself. But Crowley was connected to several irregular or fringe Masonic organizations, especially within continental Europe and the occult circles. Mainstream Anglo-American Freemasonry, however, generally didn't recognize his Masonic status. And I've actually seen communications in books about Crowley where he kind of fell out with various groups because of some of his views. And Crowley was never a central figure in mainstream Freemasonry. Many regular Masons considered him very scandalous or illegitimate. But effectively, though, mainstream regular Masonry systems were largely created with the help of him and other people who were involved in all sorts of esoteric systems. And irregular or occult-adjacent systems have definitely been seen to be inspirational for Masonics in their rituals. And Crowley operated mostly in that category. Crowley's occult orders varied heavily from initiation rituals, symbolic degrees, and hermetic traditions, and ceremonial structures very similar to Masonry. Now, to outside observers, these overlaps blurred in both directions. Freemasonry, ceremonial magic, and occult societies borrowed and stole from each other. So critics therefore argue that Masonry and occultism are somehow interconnected, and they're branches of the same hidden tradition. And of course, Masons will say, yeah, they're superficial similarities, but they don't mean anything, and that many ceremonial traditions share symbolic language. Well, if you look at the occult interpretation of Masonry, conspiracy writers often frame Masonry as an outer shell, concealing deeper esoteric teachings. According to this theory, lower degree Masons knew very little. Higher initiates possess hidden knowledge, and the symbols encode ancient wisdom traditions, and secrecy protects esoteric teachings from outsiders. Now, this model resembles the so-called mystery schools from antiquity. Writers like Lena often connect Freemasonry to the Kabbalah, to Egyptian mystery religions, to Hermetic philosophy, to Gnosticism, to Rosicrucianism, and the occult political networks. So in this framework, Freemasonry becomes part of a larger hidden spiritual and political system operating beneath and within modern civilization. Now, of course, the mainstream Masonic response is that Masonry is not an occult order. There is no secret deity to be worshipped, that members practice their own religions independently, and that rituals are allegorical morality plays, and symbols are educational rather than magical. The defenders of Freemasonry often say that you should never confuse symbolism with theology, and that Masonry mixes unrelated esoteric traditions together, and it treats these fringe occult groups as just representations of certain people who may have been involved in the founding of Masonry. But Brent Morris's book obviously reflects this position strongly, as he presents anti-Masonic claims as products of misunderstanding, fear, sensationalism, or, as I have read in many books, almost deliberate misinformation. But why does the occult theory persist? Mainly because they are still doing it. Masons are still doing initiations. They are still using symbolic language. It's still greatly secret. It's a ritual drama. There's sacred geometry. There are allegorical teachings. There is this hierarchical progression. And it does appear to most people who are not involved in Freemasonry that there is something very much more going on than just a bunch of wealthy, educated men dressing up in funny clothes. But at the heart of this debate is the official Masonic view, the esoteric view, and the conspiratorial view. And these interpretations often coexist around the same rituals, imagery, and traditions. People tend to see in it whatever they already believe about power, secrecy, spirituality, the elites, or hidden knowledge. And to some, Masonry is a harmless fraternity preserving symbolic traditions. To others, it is the surviving remnant of ancient mystical schools. Somewhere between these interpretations lies the enduring mystery that keeps Freemasonry alive in the public imagination many centuries after its beginnings. The three books that I've read represent these three different ways of looking at hidden power and historical truth. The Complete Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry says Freemasonry is misunderstood, and Born in Blood says that it's hiding forgotten medieval origins, and the Architects of Deception says that secret societies shape and have always shaped modern history itself. And perhaps that is where the real mystery of Freemasonry begins. Not in the symbols, not in the temples, not even in the rituals themselves, but in the idea that somewhere hidden behind ordinary life there may exist knowledge that most people never see. That suspicion has followed Freemasonry for centuries. The organization insists its secrets are symbolic, traditions preserved through ceremony, allegory, and ritual drama. But you may ask, why maintain this secrecy for hundreds of years if the secrets are harmless? Why the initiations and hidden signs and layered degrees? Well, to conspiracy writers, these are not the relics of tradition. They are evidence of this hidden structure. Some believe Freemasonry preserves fragments of ancient mystery schools from Egypt and Babylon, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, sacred geometry, forgotten spiritual systems that were passed quietly through history beneath the rise and fall of civilizations. And then there are those who believe Freemasonry is neither entirely innocent nor entirely sinister, but something more complicated, an initiatory system that changes the way its members see themselves and the world around them, because initiation itself is powerful. Human beings have always used rituals to transform identity. Ancient tribes and priesthoods and warrior societies, monasteries, mystery cults, all understood that secrecy creates meaning, and hidden knowledge creates hierarchy, and ceremony creates belonging. The moment a person feels they have crossed a threshold into deeper understanding, they begin to see themselves as differently. And perhaps that is the true power of all secret societies. Not necessarily that they possess supernatural knowledge, but that they create the feeling of access to hidden truth. That feeling changes people. It creates loyalty, identity, purpose, exclusivity, but it also creates fear. Because democratic societies are built on the assumption that power should be visible, accountable, and transparent. And secret organizations naturally provoke suspicion because they seem to operate beyond public visibility. And that is why Freemasonry became the perfect canvas for centuries of projection. To some, it's a harmless fraternity preserving ancient traditions. To others, it is the surviving remnant of hidden esoteric wisdom. To others still, it is evidence that unseen networks reshape the world behind closed doors. And maybe the reason these theories never disappear is because they touch something fundamentally human, a deep suspicion that reality may contain hidden layers, that history may not be exactly what we are told. And that seems to be coming true this week with the release finally in Washington of the first tranche of, up till now, highly classified UAP UFO files. Could it be that we have only seen the surface of our public life? That organizations like Freemasonry have truly possessed secret knowledge, and it's been impossible up till now to see what this knowledge is? But is the dam breaking? And layers of secrecy are melting away so that this question may finally be answered. Things will become more visible. On the one hand, Freemasonry is public presenting itself in a very positive way, but on the other hand, it undeniably contains things that are very much less than savory. These secret rituals, these symbolic oaths, the restricted membership, the almost exclusion of women, the archaic language, traditions preserved across centuries. The key issue is this: most modern organizations do not operate this way anymore, but Freemasonry is preserving something much older, and whether these things would ever be allowed in a legal setting are doubtful. But in Freemasonry, they're still going on, and the people within Freemasonry are operating on the surface the things that wouldn't be allowed in their public life. Critics say that explanation with an equally important observation is that people with wealth, influence, and institutional power rarely devote enormous energy to meaningless activities. So there is a suspicion that why are politicians, judges, military officers, bankers, intellectuals, business elites, cultural leaders, all these people, why are they getting so involved in rituals and what some people would consider to be meaningless activities when they could be devoting their time, their influence and wealth to the betterment of the world? Maybe the real secret of Freemasonry is not that it possesses hidden world domination plans. Maybe the real secret is that modern civilization has become so stripped of ritual and meaning and initiation that organizations that preserve those things now appear mysterious by default. And once secrecy exists, the imagination inevitably fills in the rest. And this creates the real paradox in 2026. Modern society is increasingly secular, technological, transparent, and skeptical of tradition, and yet organizations like Freemasonry seem to survive precisely because they offer the opposite: the mystery, the continuity, the ritual, the hierarchy, the symbolism, and the belonging. Thank you very much.